The sheer scale of the conference hall dwarfed any structure humanity had ever conceived. Envoy David Chen stood before the Galactic Council, his heart hammering against his ribs. He gazed out at the dozens of alien species seated in their designated alcoves, some scaled, some feathered, some appearing as living crystal. This was humanity's pivotal moment. After 2 centuries of dreaming of the stars, they had finally engineered drives fast enough to reach them. And waiting here, between the distant suns, was an entire civilization that had been observing Earth for millennia. The Council's verdict was already clear. Chen could see it in the hushed whispers exchanged between the representatives. The Zeffironi envoy, a tall being with 4 arms and skin like polished blue steel, rose from her position. Her voice filled the chamber, requiring no visible amplification. Humanity, you are invited to join the Galactic Council. Your engineers are ingenious. Your merchants are honest. Your artisans create beauty we have never conceived. However, there is one condition, and it is absolute. Chen's stomach tightened. He had anticipated limitations, but the finality in her tone filled him with dread. You are prohibited from constructing vessels of war. You may build freighters, exploration ships, defensive platforms, and civilian craft, but nothing designed for offensive military action. This restriction is permanent. A profound silence descended upon the hall. Chen glanced back at the human delegation. General Morrison's face was ashen. Admiral Rodriguez was staring at the floor. They all knew Earth's history. They knew precisely what the Council had seen in their studies of humanity's past. May I inquire as to the reason? Chen asked, his voice carefully neutral. A different representative stood. This one looked almost human, save for golden eyes that seemed to see through all pretense. Known to the other species as the eldest, he spoke with a voice like a distant storm. We have examined your past, Envoy Chen. In your last 5 millennia, your species has engaged in over 40,000 separate wars. You have forged weapons with the sole purpose of inflicting suffering. You have incinerated cities, poisoned ecosystems, and twisted the fabric of science into an instrument of slaughter. Your capacity for both creation and annihilation is unique in this galaxy. Chen wanted to argue, but he could not. Everything the eldest said was true. We do not despise you, the Zeffironi envoy continued, her voice softening. We dread what you could evolve into, given the means to take your conflicts to the stars. This council has upheld peace for 10 millennia. We cannot jeopardize that peace, not even for a species as promising as yours. The vote was unanimous. 53 species consented to admit humanity under the Terran Restriction Accords. Chen signed the treaty with a pen forged from lunar regolith. It felt impossibly heavy in his hand. 50 years passed. Humanity adjusted. They engineered the most efficient cargo haulers in the galaxy, vessels that could move more goods faster than anything the Council had ever witnessed. Human exploration ships mapped uncharted nebulae and discovered novel life forms. Human merchants amassed fortunes, and human colonies blossomed across a dozen systems. Earth's economy surged. Children grew up learning alien languages alongside their native tongues. But the military professionals quietly tendered their resignations. Defense-focused corporations pivoted to civilian engineering. And deep within secure government archives on Earth, Mars, and Europa, contingency files were authored, sealed, and locked away. Files that all began with the same chilling phrase. In the event the Accords must be violated, Admiral Sarah Okonkwo was one of those who resigned. She had been Earth's youngest fleet commander, a tactical prodigy who had dissected every major conflict in human history. When the Accords were signed, she was 40 years old and at the zenith of her career. She submitted her papers the same day Chen signed the treaty. Why serve a species that's not permitted to defend itself? She had remarked to her staff. She retired to a modest home in Kenya, overlooking the Great Rift Valley, humanity's cradle. She lectured on military history at a local university, penned books on ancient naval strategy, and tried to put the stars out of her mind. But every night she would gaze skyward, wondering what would happen when something out there finally decided humanity was prey. The Council offered protection, or so they said. Their peacekeeping armadas patrolled major trade lanes. Their defense platforms guarded key systems. But these forces hadn't fought a genuine war in 8,000 years. They trained. They ran drills. They studied tactics from ancient conflicts. But none of them truly comprehended the meaning of war anymore. Humanity prospered under the Council's watch. The accords became an accepted fact of life like gravity or the light-speed barrier. A new generation came of age having never known Earth's military might. They visited museums, saw the old battleships on display, and laughed at how primitive they seemed. They couldn't fathom why anyone would need such things in a galaxy unified in peace. Envoy Chen grew old and retired, replaced by younger diplomats who had never known a pre-contact Earth. General Morrison passed away, and Admiral Rodriguez followed. The generation that remembered Earth's true power was vanishing. Only Sarah Okonkwo remained, now 70 years old, teaching students who had never seen conflict. She showed them recordings of ancient battles, explained the strategies of long-dead generals, and tried to make them understand why these lessons still mattered. War isn't about honor or glory, she told her classes. It's about survival. And the species that forgets how to fight is the species that perishes when something hungry comes knocking. Her students would nod politely and take notes, but she saw the disbelief in their eyes. They lived in a peaceful galaxy. What could possibly threaten them? Sarah looked up at the stars that night, a cold certainty settling in her chest. Something was coming. She didn't know what or when, but 50 years of peace had made the galaxy soft, and when the danger arrived, the Council would finally learn why humanity had been forbidden from building warships in the first place. They would learn that some rules are made to be broken. The distress signal came from the Outer Rim on a Tuesday morning, Earth Standard Time. The message was fragmented, saturated with static and screaming. The words that punched through were nonsensical at first. They're consuming the stations. They're consuming everything. God help us! They're replicating! Then silence. The Council's reaction was swift but bewildered. They dispatched a peacekeeping squadron to investigate. 12 vessels, commanded by officers who had trained their whole lives, but had never fired a shot in anger. The squadron arrived at the Outer Rim 3 days later. What they found was documented by their sensor logs before their own transmissions abruptly ceased. The stations were gone, not obliterated but consumed. In their place, thousands of dark shapes drifted, each the size of a small starship. They moved with a chilling purpose, stripping asteroids down to dust, converting matter into more of themselves. When the Council ships approached, the shapes turned as one. The engagement lasted 11 minutes. All 12 Council ships were lost. Only one managed to broadcast a final garbled message. They adapt. Every weapon we use, they learn. They're not ships. They're alive. The galaxy would later learn their name, the Void Swarm. No one knew their origin or their motive. They simply consumed everything in their path, growing stronger and more numerous with each destroyed world. Within a month, 3 Council species on the Outer Rim went silent. Entire civilizations, millions of lives simply erased. Planets were scoured down to the bedrock. Then the bedrock itself was consumed, converted into more swarm. The Council mobilized its grand defense fleets, vessels that hadn't seen combat in 8 millennia. Their commanders were highly educated, brilliant strategists who had studied ancient wars and learned every tactical theory. They formed perfect battle lines, established flawless communication protocols, and engaged the enemy with textbook precision. The swarm didn't follow any rules. They didn't form lines or maintain formations. They attacked like an insectile horde, overwhelming defenses through sheer brute numbers. When Council ships used energy weapons, the swarm's armor evolved to absorb the blasts. When they switched to kinetic projectiles, the swarm grew denser carapaces. Every engagement was a lesson for the enemy. The Council lost 40 ships in the first major battle, then 60 in the next, then over 100 when they attempted a coordinated assault. The enemy was spreading, moving inexorably toward the core systems where the major civilizations resided. Panic spread faster than the swarm itself. On Earth, people watched the news feeds in rising terror. The aliens, who had seemed so powerful and advanced, were losing. The Council that had maintained peace for 10,000 years couldn't stop an enemy that had appeared from nowhere. Human colonies on the fringe of Council space began pleading for evacuation. Sarah Okonkwo was in the middle of a lecture when her old military communicator buzzed. She hadn't heard that sound in 50 years. Excusing herself from the classroom, she took the call in private. Admiral Okonkwo, this is General Park from Earth Defense Command. We need you to come out of retirement. We need everyone. Sarah looked at her reflection in the window. 70 years old, gray hair, arthritis in her left knee. What's happening, General? We're calling an emergency meeting. Everyone who still remembers what real war looks like. We have to make a decision, and it needs to be made by people who understand what it will cost. The meeting convened in a secure underground bunker beneath Geneva. 20 individuals attended, the last vestiges of Earth's military leadership from before the Accords. They watched the sensor logs from the Council's disastrous battles. They analyzed the swarm's tactics, and they all reached the same grim conclusion. The Council is going to lose, stated Admiral Chen, David Chen's daughter, who had followed her father into the diplomatic corps. They know tactics, but they don't understand war. Can we help them? Someone asked. Not without breaking the Accords, General Park replied. And if we break the Accords, the Council might see us as a bigger threat than the swarm. The debate raged for 6 hours. Some argued for staying neutral, for letting the Council handle its own crisis. Others insisted humanity had a moral duty to help. The turning point came when a new message arrived during the meeting. New Harmony, a human colony world with 2 million people, had been attacked. The swarm had reached human space. The distress calls played over the speakers. Screams, explosions, desperate pleas for help. Then, the colonial governor's final transmission. Tell Earth we tried to evacuate. There wasn't enough time. Tell them to fight. Tell them not to let this happen to anyone else. 6 hours after the attack began, New Harmony went silent. Rescue ships arrived days later and found a dead world. The oceans were gone. The atmosphere was gone. Even the bedrock had been stripped away, leaving behind a smaller sphere of barren iron and nickel. Gray dust drifted in clouds where cities had once stood. And orbiting the dead planet, the swarm multiplied, building new vessels from the mass they had consumed. Sarah Okonkwo stood in the bunker and felt something cold settle in her chest. She had known this day would come. For 50 years she had waited, teaching and preparing, hoping she was wrong. Now the bill had come due. We build warships, she said quietly. We break the Accords and we fight. The Council will try to stop us, Admiral Chen warned. Let them try, Sarah countered. We're not asking for permission. We're not debating this. We're going to war, and anyone who tries to stop us is in our way. The vote was unanimous. Earth's Prime Minister was informed immediately. She was a young woman, 43 years old, part of the generation that had never known war. She listened to the military leadership explain their decision, and Sarah watched the fear and determination war in her eyes. How long until we can field a fleet? The Prime Minister asked. 2 years if we mobilize everything. Maybe 18 months if we push hard. Then push hard. I'll inform the Council. The message went out the next day, broadcast on every frequency, translated into every Council language. Earth's Prime Minister stood before the cameras, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. The Terran Restriction Accords are void. Humanity will begin construction of military vessels immediately. We will fight the void swarm. The Council may assist us, sanction us, or attempt to stop us, but we will not watch our species die because of a treaty written by people who forgot what survival costs. The Council's response came within hours. Threats of sanctions, blockades, military action to enforce the Accords. Demands that humanity stand down and let the Council handle the crisis. The messages grew increasingly desperate as more worlds fell to the swarm. Earth ignored them all. The forges were already burning. The shipyards over Mars worked 24 hours a day, their construction lights bright enough to be seen from Earth's surface. These facilities, built to construct massive cargo vessels, were now being retooled for something the galaxy hadn't seen in 10,000 years, a human war machine. The Council sent delegations to stop the construction. They arrived in diplomatic vessels carrying sanctions and threats. Earth's new Secretary of Defense, a former cargo pilot named James Torres, met them at the orbital station. You're violating the Accords, the Zeffironi ambassador said, her blue metallic skin somehow conveying anger. The Council will not tolerate this. Torres looked at her with tired eyes. Then stop us. Send your peacekeepers. Send your fleets. We'll add them to the list of things we need to fight through. You don't understand what you're doing. This is why you were restricted. Your species turns everything into weapons. You'll become the very thing we feared. Maybe, Torres replied. But at least we'll be alive to regret it. Your people are dying out there because you forgot how to fight. We never did. The Council imposed sanctions. Human ships were banned from major trade routes. Human goods were blockaded, but none of it mattered. Earth's economy shifted to total war production, a grim process humanity had perfected over millennia. The designs that emerged from Earth's military bureaus shocked the Council observers who remained. Where Council ships were elegant and efficient, human warships were brutal and practical. The first class off the production lines was designated indomitable, and everything about them screamed violence. They had no energy shields. Council officers were aghast when they saw the specifications. Instead, the indomitable class featured layered composite armor plating, thick enough to stop anything short of a direct antimatter blast. The ships were compartmentalized into dozens of sealed sections, each capable of functioning independently. A ship could lose half its structure and still fight. The weapons loadout was equally disturbing. Council ships typically carried one or two specialized weapon types. Human ships mounted everything they could fit: railguns that fired metal slugs at relativistic speeds, plasma cannons that melted armor, missile tubes that could launch everything from conventional explosives to nuclear warheads, and laser arrays for point defense. If one weapon didn't work, they switched to another. "It's wasteful," a council engineer complained. "Too many redundant systems, too much mass dedicated to weapons. The efficiency is terrible." The human engineer beside him shrugged. "Efficiency doesn't matter if you're dead. These ships are built to take damage and keep fighting. That's all that matters." The council was more horrified when they learned about human tactical doctrine. Human captains were trained to ram enemy vessels if their weapons failed. They were expected to sacrifice damaged ships to buy time for others. The concept of acceptable casualties, which the council had abandoned millennia ago, was fundamental to every human battle plan. Worse still, humans volunteered by the millions to crew these death traps. Young people who had grown up in peace signed up to fight an enemy they barely understood. They painted names on their ships: Vengeance, Retribution, Remember New Harmony. They sang war songs over open communication channels. They marked kills on their hulls like ancient fighter pilots. Admiral Sarah Okonkwo was brought out of retirement to command the First Fleet. She stood on the bridge of the UESS Defiance, the first super dreadnought humanity had built in 70 years, and felt the decades fall away. This was what she had trained for. The ships came together faster than anyone expected. 18 months after Earth declared it would fight, the First Fleet was operational: 32 destroyers, 16 cruisers, 8 battleships, and the Defiance itself. It wasn't enough to win the war, but it was enough to start fighting back. The council sent one final delegation before the fleet launched. The eldest himself came, the ancient being who had condemned humanity's violent history 50 years ago. He met with Okonkwo in her ready room. "I came to see if we were right to fear you," he said. Sarah poured him water, the universal gesture of hospitality. "And what do you see?" "I see a species that remembers war. I see weapons designed not for show but for killing. I see soldiers who sing songs about death." He paused. "I see why we were afraid. Are you here to stop us?" "No," the eldest said. "I'm here to ask for help. The council is losing. We've lost 60 systems in the last month. Our fleets are being destroyed faster than we can rebuild them. We don't know how to fight anymore, perhaps. We never did. Not like you." Sarah sat down across from him. "What are you offering?" "The Accords are suspended for the duration of the crisis. Full access to council resources and intelligence. Alliance, not servitude. And afterward, we'll renegotiate everything. We're going to fight whether you help us or not," Sarah said. "But having the council's support will save lives." She extended her hand. "We have a deal." The eldest looked at her hand, then clasped it. His skin felt like warm stone. "I hope we're doing the right thing. But I fear that even if we win, the galaxy will never be the same. You're unleashing something we've kept locked away for 10,000 years. We're unleashing humanity," Sarah said. "You'll just have to trust that we remember why we fight." The First Fleet launched 3 days later. The crew of the Defiance gathered in the main hangar. Admiral Okonkwo stood before 3,000 people. She didn't give them speeches about honor. She told them the truth. "We're going into battle against an enemy that adapts. We're going to lose ships. We're going to lose friends. Some of you won't come home. But we're going to fight anyway, because that's what humans do. We fight when we're told we can't. We fight when the odds are impossible. We fight because giving up means dying, and we are too stubborn to die quietly." The crew roared their approval. "Let's show the swarm what happens when you attack humanity," she said. "Let's show the Council why they were right to fear us. And let's show the galaxy that the species that split the atom and reached the stars is not going to roll over and die." The first fleet jumped to faster than light, heading toward the Kepler Junction. Behind them, Earth's forges continued burning. The Kepler Junction was a strategic choke point. The Void Swarm had taken it 6 weeks ago, and every Council attempt to retake it had failed. Admiral Okonkwo's fleet dropped out of FTL at the edge of the system. Sensors immediately lit up. Tens of thousands of swarm vessels. "They know we're here," reported Commander Harris. "They're moving to intercept." Sarah studied the holographic display. The swarm was forming a solid wall, the same tactic that had destroyed the Council fleets. "All ships, this is Okonkwo. Remember your training. We're not here to trade shots. We're here to break them. Battle formation Delta. Give them everything." The human fleet split into 3 chaotic, unpredictable groups. The destroyer groups hit the flanks. The cruisers and battleships punched through the center, with the Defiance leading the charge. The swarm surged. Their first weapons fired streams of corrosive matter that ate through Council shields in seconds. The human ships had no shields. The matter struck armor plating and burned, but the layered defenses held. The human fleet kept coming. "All weapons fire at will," Sarah commanded. The fleet opened up. Railguns hurled slugs of depleted uranium. Plasma cannons superheated the void. Missiles streaked out by the thousands, some carrying nuclear payloads banned for millennia. The swarm's adaptive armor began working. Energy weapons became less effective. Kinetic rounds started bouncing off. But the humans had anticipated this. As one weapon type failed, they switched to another. When the swarm adapted to railguns, ships switched to missiles. When missiles became ineffective, they switched back to plasma. The swarm couldn't keep up. They had never faced an enemy that carried such a diverse arsenal. The battle turned into a brutal slugging match. Human ships took massive damage. The destroyer Intrepid lost its forward section but kept fighting. The cruiser Bangkok was cut in half, but both sections continued to engage until their power cores failed. The Council observers watching from long range were horrified. Human ships were dying, but they were taking the swarm with them. 3 hours in, Sarah made a decision that would define the war. The destroyer Courage was crippled, its engines dead. The captain requested permission to evacuate. "Negative, Courage. How many crew do you need to maintain heading and overload the reactor?" There was a pause. The captain's voice came back steady. "Just 10, Admiral. We'll give you one hell of a distraction." The Courage adjusted course, pointing directly at the largest swarm concentration. The ship's remaining crew evacuated while 10 volunteers stayed behind. They pushed the engines to maximum, sent a final transmission singing an old Earth sea shanty, and rammed the Courage into the swarm formation. The reactor detonation vaporized 300 swarm vessels and disrupted their entire line. The human fleet poured through the gap. 6 hours after the battle began, the swarm retreated. Humanity had won its first major engagement. The cost was severe. 30 ships destroyed, 12,000 crew members dead. But the swarm had lost an entire fleet, and for the first time they had been forced to run. Word spread across the galaxy. The species that wasn't allowed to build warships had just won a battle the Council couldn't. A Vidian tactical observer, a species known for their analytical minds, requested a meeting with Okonkwo. "I don't understand," he said. "You won, but you lost a quarter of your fleet." The Council would consider that a catastrophic defeat. Sarah was reviewing casualty reports. She didn't look up. "Did we complete our objective?" "Yes, you secured the Kepler Junction." Then it was a victory. War isn't about preserving ships. It's about accomplishing the mission, whatever the cost. But your people, the 10 volunteers on the Courage, you sacrificed them. Now Sarah looked up, her eyes hard. If we had retreated, the swarm would still control the junction. More billions would die. Those 12,000 people gave their lives to prevent that. Their sacrifice had meaning. That's what you don't understand. You've had peace so long you forgot that sometimes the price of victory is paid in blood. The Vidian was quiet. The Council fears what you're becoming. You're proving why the Accords existed. Maybe, Sarah said, but we're also proving that we're the only ones who can win this war. Your choice is simple. Accept our help and live, or maintain your pride and die. We'll keep fighting either way. Over the next 6 months, humanity won 4 more major battles, each time with different, unpredictable tactics. The swarm began to show something that shocked council analysts: hesitation. They avoided direct engagements with human fleets. Admiral Okonkwo was promoted to Supreme Commander of Allied forces, leading both human and council vessels. She began training council officers in actual combat, teaching them lessons humanity had learned over thousands of years of warfare. The war was far from over. But for the first time, the tide had turned. The war lasted 3 years. 3 years of humanity teaching the galaxy how to fight again. Admiral Sarah Okonkwo was 81 years old when the final offensive began. She stood on the bridge of the UESS Defiance, now a battered veteran of 40 engagements. The target was a corrupted dwarf galaxy at the edge of explored space, the swarm's origin point, their central nexus. The assault fleet was the largest ever assembled, 200 human warships alongside 500 council vessels, now crewed by officers who had learned human tactics. All ships, Admiral Okonkwo broadcast. Today we finish this. They made us remember what war means. Now we're going to teach them what it cost to threaten this galaxy. The fleet jumped and immediately faced the largest swarm concentration ever encountered. Millions of vessels. This was their home. The battle began, and then the plan fell apart. The Nexus activated a weapon, a pulse of energy that disrupted all FTL drives, trapping the entire Allied fleet. There would be no retreat. This was a fight to the death. All ships emergency formation, Sarah ordered. Battle groups with me. We're going straight for the Nexus. The Defiance led a spearhead of battleships directly into the heart of the swarm. It was suicide, and everyone knew it. The battleship Indomitable exploded, taking 10,000 swarm vessels with it. The Defiance shuddered as weapons tore into its hull. "Ma'am, we're losing structural integrity," Commander Harris reported, blood running down his face. "We can't take much more." "We don't need much more. Just get me to the Nexus." The Defiance broke through the final swarm line. Ahead, the Nexus pulsed, a sphere of writhing matter the size of a small moon. "All ships concentrate fire on the Nexus." "Everything!" 700 ships fired as one. The Nexus began to collapse, but it was fighting back, healing itself, lashing out with energy tendrils. The Defiance took a direct hit. The blast tore through engineering, severing the main power core. "Evacuate the ship," Sarah ordered. "All hands to the escape pods." "That's an order."
"Ma'am," Harris protested, "the Nexus is still active."
"If we retreat now, this was all for nothing." Sarah looked at the ship's status. The main weapons were offline. The engines were dead. But the reactor was still intact, held by failing containment fields. And the Defiance was pointing right at the target. "Everyone off my ship now. That's my final order as your commanding officer." The bridge crew reluctantly evacuated. When the bridge was empty, Sarah sealed the doors and took control of the reactor. She opened a channel to the fleet. "This is Admiral Okonkwo. All ships pull back to minimum safe distance. The Defiance is going to finish this." Protests flooded the channel. Sarah smiled and closed it. She released the reactor containment fields and engaged the emergency thrusters. The Defiance lurched forward. Sarah strapped herself into the captain's chair. "I lived a good life," she said to the empty bridge. "Got to die doing what I loved." Not many people can say that. The Defiance struck the Nexus. The reactor detonated, a miniature star born in the heart of the swarm. The explosion consumed the Nexus and vaporized millions of swarm vessels. The war was won. The survivors' way. The casualty reports were staggering. 200 million dead across all species. But the galaxy survived. 6 months later, the Galactic Council convened. The debate was intense. Some species argued the Accords should be reinstated. Humanity had proven how dangerous they were. They were interrupted by the new human delegate, Ambassador Maria Chen, David's granddaughter and a veteran of the final battle. "We are not asking for permission anymore," she said simply. "The Accords are void, not because you're lifting them, but because we no longer recognize their authority. We fought, we bled, and we saved this galaxy together. We are keeping our warships. If that makes us dangerous, so be it. At least we are dangerous and alive." The Council voted. The Accords were officially dissolved. In their place, a mutual defense treaty was signed. Humanity would share its military technology and train council officers, serving as the galaxy's first line of defense. The memorial for Admiral Okonkwo was built on New Harmony, now being terraformed back to life. It was a statue of an old woman on a ship's bridge looking to the stars. The plaque read, "They warned us not to build warships. We did it anyway. Not because we love war, but because we refused to die helpless." Years later, a young council officer visited the memorial. She asked her human guide, a gray-haired veteran of the war, "Do you think you'll ever need these warships again now that the threat is gone?" The veteran looked up at the ships in orbit, human and council vessels patrolling together. "Hope we don't. But we'll keep them ready. The swarm wasn't the first threat, and it won't be the last. Peace is good, but it's fragile. War's terrible, but sometimes it's necessary." The galaxy forgot that lesson. Cost billions of lives to remember. We're not forgetting again.